If you could go back in time 10 years and give your past self just one piece of advice about money, what would it be? Would you tell yourself to save more? To spend less? Maybe to enjoy life a little more instead of stressing over every dollar? Or maybe you'd whisper, "Hey, don't co-sign that loan for your nephew." We've all had those moments, wishing we'd done something differently. But here's the truth. No matter what your past looked like, what really matters is what you do now. Because what you do in the next 5 or 10 years can make the difference between a retirement that feels peaceful and one that feels like you're constantly holding your breath. I want to talk to you today not about budgets or stock tips or retirement calculators. There are enough people out there giving you that. What I want to talk about is something deeper, something most people never think about. It's the type of retiree you're becoming. I've spent a lot of time talking to folks in their 60s, 70s, even 80s, people from all walks of life. Some with pensions, some with only Social Security, some who own a few properties, and others who live in cozy apartments with their little dog named Lucky. And you know what I've noticed? It's not always the person with the most money who feels the richest. I've met people with $1 million in their retirement account who still worry every time they go out to eat. And I've met people living on a fixed income who seem more relaxed, more joyful, and, yes, even more secure. Why? Because money alone isn't what makes you wealthy in retirement. It's how you use it, how you think about it, and more importantly, how you live with it. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Okay, sounds nice. But what does that actually mean? Well, in talking with all these people, I started noticing patterns. I started seeing that most retirees tend to fall into one of 3 types. And while they all start out with the best intentions, only one of those types ends up truly at peace with their money. The other 2? They often find themselves stressed, anxious, sometimes even embarrassed. And the worst part? They don't realize they're heading down that path until it's too late to turn around. So let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about it. Do you feel confident when you spend money? Or do you get that little knot in your stomach every time the card reader beeps? Do you feel like you're in control of your financial life right now? Or do you feel like you're just kind of hoping things work out? These aren't easy questions, but they're important ones. Because once you understand which type of retiree you're becoming, you can start making small, meaningful changes that protect your future and make your present a whole lot more enjoyable. And don't worry, this isn't about judgment. This is about awareness, clarity, empowerment. Think of this like a gentle conversation with a friend who cares about you and just wants to help you avoid the potholes on the road ahead. I'm not here to scare you, but I'm here to show you the truth. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's when the real magic starts. So here's what we're going to do. In the next few minutes, I'll walk you through each of these 3 types of retirees. You might recognize yourself in one of them. You might recognize a friend, or a sibling, or even your spouse. That's okay. This isn't about getting it perfect. It's about getting it right for you from this point forward. You've worked too hard and come too far to live the rest of your life feeling unsure about money. You deserve peace, security, and yes, even joy. Let's find out what kind of retiree you don't want to be, and more importantly, how to make sure that's not where you're headed. Let's start with the first type. But first, take a breath. Grab a cup of tea if you want. This next part might feel uncomfortably familiar, and that's exactly why it's so powerful. Let me tell you about Bill. Bill retired at 67 after working nearly 40 years as a civil engineer. He had a pension, some money in his 401k, and his house was nearly paid off. No private jets or yachts in the backyard, but enough to live comfortably. And at first, that's exactly what he did. He paid his bills on time, bought the occasional gadget he'd been eyeing for years, treated his grandkids to ice cream and birthdays. Life was good, easy, familiar. But as the months rolled into years, something started to shift. Bill stopped checking his account balances regularly. He figured, "I'm not spending recklessly. I've earned this. I should be fine." He didn't keep up with his financial planner. He ignored little things, rising property taxes, the slow creep of inflation, the higher grocery bills that didn't seem like much at first. Until they were. And when unexpected costs started popping up, like dental work that wasn't covered, home repairs, and helping out a struggling family member, Bill dipped into his savings without much thought. Not because he was careless, but because he believed he had plenty. He'd done the right things. Right? It wasn't until his 75th birthday that he realized something didn't feel right. He looked at his savings and felt the first twinge of worry. It wasn't gone, not even close, but it wasn't growing either. And for the first time, he wondered, what happens if I live another 15 years, or 20? This is the first type of retiree, the comfortably complacent. They're the ones who did a decent job saving, who live within their means, and who assume that if they're not out buying luxury cars or flying first class, then everything will be fine. But here's the problem. Comfort can be a trap. It lulls you into a false sense of security. You stop paying attention, stop adjusting, stop learning. And retirement isn't a set-it-and-forget-it stage of life. It's a living, breathing season that changes, sometimes quickly, sometimes quietly. Let's talk about inflation for a moment. It's one of those invisible forces that quietly eats away at your buying power. 10 years ago, you could walk out of the grocery store with 2 bags for $40. Now, 1 bag, and you're hoping there's no surprise tax. And yet, many comfortably complacent retirees still budget like they did 5 or 10 years ago. It's not about panic. It's about awareness. It's about realizing that good enough can turn into not quite enough if you're not checking in. And then there's the mindset piece, perhaps the most important part of all. People like Bill often see money as something to not worry about. They think avoiding financial stress means avoiding financial conversations altogether. But that's how blind spots form. That's how little cracks become bigger problems. Now let me be clear. There's nothing wrong with enjoying your retirement. You should. You've earned it. But true peace of mind doesn't come from guessing. It comes from knowing. So if any part of Bill's story sounds familiar to you, take it as a gentle wake-up call, not a warning siren. Start by asking yourself a few simple questions. When's the last time you looked at all your monthly expenses? Really looked? Have you factored in things like inflation, rising healthcare costs, or unexpected home repairs? Are you just hoping your money lasts, or are you actively making sure it will? You don't have to overhaul your whole life to fix this. Sometimes, it's just a matter of making a few small tweaks. Maybe it's meeting with a financial advisor once a year, even virtually. Maybe it's writing down every expense for 1 month to get a clearer picture. Maybe it's just being honest with yourself about how much you're really spending on gifts, takeout, or cable subscriptions you don't even watch anymore. And more than anything, it's about staying engaged. You don't have to become a financial expert. You just have to stay curious, stay involved, stay in control. Because the truth is, wealth in retirement isn't just about having a big number in the bank. It's about having the confidence that your money will support the life you want, not just today, but for all the years still ahead of you. Bill didn't go broke, but he did learn, later than he wished, that comfort without awareness can be costly. Luckily, he caught it in time. And you can too. So, now that we've met our first type, I want you to sit with this for a moment. Are you on autopilot with your money? Are you assuming I'm fine without really checking if you are? If the answer is yes, or even maybe, then it's time to shift. You don't need fear, you need focus. And speaking of focus, let's move on to the second type of retiree. This one looks a lot like generosity on the surface, but underneath, it can quietly drain everything you've worked for, emotionally and financially. Now let's talk about a different kind of story, one that hits a little closer to the heart. Meet Diane. She's 72, a retired school teacher, and one of the kindest people you'll ever meet. The kind of person who remembers every birthday, brings soup when someone's sick, and always insists you take the leftovers home. Diane spent her life putting others first. She raised 3 kids, supported her husband through cancer, and when she finally reached retirement, she looked forward to slowing down, reading more, maybe joining a little book club. But here's what actually happened. Her oldest daughter went through a divorce and moved back home. With 2 kids and a mountain of bills, Diane, of course, helped. She dipped into her emergency fund to cover rent while her daughter got back on her feet. Then her son lost his job and needed a few thousand just until things settled. And then her youngest called in tears because of a credit card mix-up that risked ruining her credit score. Each time, Diane said yes. without hesitation, because that's who she is. She didn't even think twice. But after a while, the yeses started adding up. And before she knew it, Diane wasn't just helping, she was sacrificing. Her own financial cushion was shrinking, quietly, steadily. And no one seemed to notice, including her. See, the second type of retiree who often ends up struggling isn't the one who overspends on luxuries. It's the one who gives too much away out of love. The overgiver. And let me tell you right now, if this feels familiar to you, you're not alone. This is one of the most common traps older adults fall into, especially those with big hearts and a lifetime of being the family rock. You've always been the helper, the rescuer, the one everyone leans on. And honestly, that's beautiful. It speaks to your character. But here's the hard truth. You can't pour from an empty cup. There's a difference between being generous and being financially vulnerable. And that difference often comes down to boundaries, not just with your money, but with your guilt. Because a lot of overgivers aren't just responding to need. They're responding to fear. Fear of being seen as selfish. Fear of saying no. Fear of watching someone they love struggle. But when you keep saying yes at the cost of your own stability, what happens when you need help? Let me be clear here. This isn't about cutting people off or turning your back on family. It's about creating a system that protects you, while still allowing you to show up for the people you care about. Diane didn't want to be a burden to her kids later in life. But ironically, the more she gave now, the more likely that outcome became. Eventually, she had to have a hard conversation, with herself first, and then with her family. She started by reviewing her finances honestly. She looked at how much she'd already given in just 2 years. And she realized she wasn't just helping. She was rescuing, without a plan. So she made a shift. Instead of saying yes automatically, she started saying, "Let me think about it." That one sentence changed everything. It gave her space to breathe, to check in, and to decide based on reality, not emotion. She also created what she called a love limit, a set amount each year that she was willing and able to give without putting herself at risk. Once that limit was met, she had peace of mind knowing she'd done what she could, without sacrificing her future. And you know what? Her family understood. In fact, they respected her more for being clear. Because deep down, no one wants to see their parents struggling because of choices they made. If you're an overgiver, I want you to know this. Boundaries aren't selfish. They're wise. Saying no to someone else's crisis doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care about your own stability just as much as theirs. You've spent a lifetime being there for everyone else. Now it's time to be there for you too. So here's something to reflect on. When was the last time you said yes out of guilt instead of ability? Have you ever pulled from your savings without checking how it might affect you long term? Do you feel uncomfortable setting limits because you're afraid of disappointing people? If so, you might be slowly drifting into the overgiver role. And trust me, awareness is your superpower. Because once you see the pattern, you can change the outcome. Now, before we move on, I want you to take a deep breath and remember this. You are not alone. You're not a bad parent or friend for wanting to feel secure. You're wise for thinking ahead. You're brave for even listening to this conversation. And speaking of bravery, our third type of retiree is someone who looks cautious on the outside, but inside, they're living with a fear that quietly robs them of joy. It's time to talk about the worried waiter, the person who's so afraid of running out of money that they never actually enjoy it. Let me introduce you to Harold. Harold is 78. He's healthy, sharp, and financially stable. In fact, he has more than enough money to live comfortably. No debt, a paid-off home, a nice little nest egg in savings, and even some investments that have done surprisingly well over the years. But you know what Harold hasn't done in nearly 20 years? Taken a vacation. Gone out to dinner without looking at the prices. Bought something just because it made him smile. Why? Because Harold is terrified that if he spends, he'll run out. He's the third type of retiree, the worried waiter. These are the folks who have done everything right. They worked hard, saved, lived within their means, and now they have a modest or even solid financial cushion. But they're still waiting. Waiting for a rainy day, waiting for a medical emergency, waiting for the economy to crash. waiting for some invisible, inevitable disaster they can't quite name, but they're sure it's coming. And so, they don't touch their money. Not really. They live as though they're still earning minimum wage in 1975. They clip coupons they don't need. They skip out on things they've dreamed about for decades. And deep down, they feel a little guilty every time they do spend, even on themselves. If you're nodding along right now or feeling that little twinge in your chest, I want you to hear this. You've already earned your peace. Don't wait until it's too late to enjoy it. Because here's the heartbreaking part of Harold's story. His wife passed away 3 years ago. They had talked for years about taking a trip to Ireland together. Her dream. But he kept putting it off. It wasn't the right time. It felt too indulgent. He wanted to make sure they were secure. Now he visits her grave every week and brings her yellow tulips, and every time he whispers the same words, "I'm sorry we waited." Listen, being careful is smart, planning ahead is wise, but living in fear of spending money you already have, that's not safety. That's a prison. And it's a prison many retirees build around themselves without realizing it. Not because they're greedy, not because they're miserly, but because they've spent so long being responsible that they've forgotten how to feel free. There's a balance. There always is. You don't have to blow through your savings on cruises and gadgets. But you also don't have to say no to every single little joy just because you might need that money in 15 years. Ask yourself, what's the point of all that saving, all that working, all that waiting, if you're never going to allow yourself to enjoy any of it? I'm not saying spend recklessly. I'm saying give yourself permission to live, to go to the nice restaurant once in a while, to buy the slightly more expensive sweater that actually makes you feel good when you wear it, to take the trip you keep thinking about. Because you know what's just as dangerous as running out of money? Running out of time. And this is where the journey comes full circle. We've now talked about all 3 types of retirees who tend to struggle, not just financially, but emotionally. The comfortably complacent retiree, who assumes everything's fine and slowly drifts off course without noticing. The overgiver, who sacrifices their own financial peace in the name of love and loyalty, often at a steep cost. And the worried waiter, who's done everything right but still lives in fear of spending, and ends up missing the best years of their life. So the question now is, which one are you? And more importantly, which one do you want to be? Because here's the good news. These types are not fixed. You're not trapped in any one of them. The moment you become aware of the pattern, you've already taken the first step toward changing it. If you've been comfortably coasting without checking your financial blind spots, start asking more questions. Get curious. Get back in the driver's seat. If you've been giving and giving without protecting your own future, pause. Reflect. And give yourself permission to set loving, healthy boundaries. And if you've been waiting for the sky to fall, waiting for the perfect moment, waiting for someone to tell you it's finally okay to spend, let me be the one to say it. It's okay. It's okay to enjoy what you've built. It's okay to live with confidence. It's okay to say, I'm not just surviving, I'm thriving. But you don't need to be a millionaire to be wealthy in retirement. You just need clarity, balance, and a little courage to make the choices that support your peace of mind, not your fear. So before this video ends, I want you to do something simple. Think about one small change you can make this week. Just one. Maybe it's calling your financial advisor for a check-in. Maybe it's reviewing your last month's spending. Maybe it's saying no to someone or saying yes to yourself. And if you feel comfortable, I'd love for you to share in the comments. What's one thing you've learned about yourself today? Remember, you're not alone in this. There are thousands of people just like you navigating these same choices. And every time one of us gets a little clearer, a little stronger, a little braver, we all rise together. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring enough to ask, am I on the path I want to be? You've still got so much life left to live. Let's make sure your money supports that life, not limits it. Until next time, take care of yourself. You've earned it.